Time now for CCTV America Inside as we look at how a painful memory is being put to good use. 20 years ago, the infamous incident known as Black Hawk Down occurred in Somalia. That's when U.S. troops became embroiled in a firefight on the streets of Mogadishu. One of the U.S. soldiers involved in the battle recently returned to Mogadishu for the first time. He spoke to Sean Calebs about what he saw, what he felt, and how it's changed him to this day.
In every way imaginable, this was a trip back to the lion's den for former Army Ranger Jeff Struker.
If you look at all the bullet holes around here, most of these are from us.
He went to Mogadishu this spring to remember a conflict the world knows as Black Hawk Down. This month marks the 20th anniversary of a day-long bloody battle between a small number of U.S. troops and thousands of Somalis. It began when soldiers were sent into the heart of Mogadishu to capture the top henchman of a warlord named Mohammed Farah Adi.
Not only was this in the middle of the daytime, but this was in the very center of the Aidid-controlled part of the city, and all of us knew what we were getting into. Okay, within a matter of minutes, this thing can spiral out of control.
The mission claimed the lives of 18 U.S. troops and injured 73 others. At the time, a sergeant, Struker was commanding a convoy of 10 troops when, in his words, it did spiral out of control.
I was shocked at how fast that many Somali fighters assembled and how dense the number of Somali fighters were.
Struker is now featured in a new movie called Return to Mogadishu. He and former Ranger Kenny Thomas are the first soldiers from the unit to come back after so many years.
Mogadishu is the most dangerous city in the world. You're putting your life on the line for going to Mogadishu. Why would you do this?
About 48 hours in the city, high risk and an anxious film crew. Matt Knighton is the director.
We're thinking ourselves, we're like, goodness, we're going back with probably some of the highest priority targets that a terrorist could ever want in the past 20 years. And we definitely kept it as confidential as possible.
Hey, Kenny, you know that we're in the Bakara market right now, right?
20 years ago, Struker and his team raced down this same street. Back then, it was a matter of life and death.
In the course of 1 or 2 city blocks, Dominic Pilla was killed behind me, and most of the vehicles were shot to pieces.
It was that night, Struker says, he forever changed.
It almost shocked me how much peace I found because of my strong Christian faith. I got to the point where I know if I drive into those city streets, within a matter of minutes, I'm going to be dead. Every cell in my body was saying, don't do this, Jeff, and you will die, you'll get your men killed.
He lived and decided to dedicate himself to the church, first as an Army chaplain, then after leaving the service as a pastor in Columbus, Georgia.
So thank God for Ryan Kelly. Y'all give it up for Ryan Kelly.
He's been at Calvary Baptist 2 years.
Calvary Baptist in Columbus, Georgia is a long way from Mogadishu. But Struker thought it was important to return to the region that helped define his life. What he found was a city in chaos. And 20 years after Black Hawk Down, an area that is a breeding ground for insurgents.
There is lingering frustration for Struker, chiefly at the way the Clinton administration ordered U.S. troops to leave shortly after the bloody fight.
The decision to pull everyone from Task Force Ranger and all U.S. forces out of Somalia essentially said to us, this was never important enough to fight for in the first place. And that was the ultimate slap in the face.
Struker is convinced that decision sent a terrible message to the rest of the world and set the stage for terrorists to flourish in a lawless environment.
No question. The conditions that the U.S. pulled out of Somalia probably led indirectly to al-Shabaab's ability to do whatever they want in Mogadishu because there was no stable government, no military or law enforcement to stop them.
So the cycle continues. Al-Shabaab just unleashed terror in neighboring Nairobi a few weeks ago, and all Struker can do is lament an opportunity as well as so many lives lost. But are there more adventures in East Africa for Struker?
For me, the chapter is closed. I have no plans to return to Mogadishu. Though it could be a beautiful city one day, I have no plans to return there.
But he will always be linked to the city that forever changed his life.
For this world, as we know it, will soon pass away.
And Sean Calebs joins us now on the set. This must have been very, very scary for him to go back there. I was in Somalia in '93. It'd take me an awful lot to get me to go back there. It's one of the scariest places on earth.
You know, if it was, I mean, clearly it was scary. I mean, there's no way around that. But to talk about the transformation, he always had a very deep Christian background. But that night, he said almost this supernatural peace came over him. He said, I knew I was going to die. I mean, that was a foregone conclusion. But he said he was convinced he was going to spend eternity in heaven, so he was very calm. And so going back, he had a chance to maybe address some of the demons that he didn't have a chance to really go through the way they left that area. But he was scared. When he went into the market, he said it all came back in an instant.
You know, it's interesting. I can understand his frustration with former President Clinton about this, and yet I think he has to understand what happened to the psyche of the American people to see those bodies dragged through the streets. He saw the war up close and personal, and yet for American citizens, that was the first time they'd seen this sort of thing. And public opinion just shifted almost overnight, didn't it?
Public opinion shifted, but should public opinion be the thing that guides our military involvement? And that's what he says. And he said to a person, Task Force Ranger was ready to go back in there, do the job, and if they all died, they all died. But he's bitter. I mean, there's no two ways around that. He's a man of deep faith, but he does not like the way the government pulled him and the rest of the troops out there.
It's interesting because the film really centers around him and his faith. What about his buddy, Kenny? What did he come away with from this experience?
To be honest with you, I didn't have a chance to speak with Kenny, but those two are very close. And the way they even went over there, it was like Kenny said, I'll go if you go.
Right.
And Jeff goes, well, I'll go if you go. And that's about the only way they went over. They're both married, and it wasn't easy for their spouses to know this. And they all kept a tight lid on this, and that was essential. If any word would have gotten out, you know, you heard the director talk about this. Come on, if Al-Shabaab or another insurgent group would have gotten hold of those two guys, they would have been sold to Al-Shabaab. You know, anything could have happened. It would have been an international incident, but the way it came out, it's a pretty emotional 9-minute film now.
And does he say it looks exactly the same as before? I mean, there's a lot.
Yeah, and I think that's the depressing part. He really thinks that the people of Mogadishu, the people of Somalia, deserve a better life. It's just chaos. It's lawless. It's nuts over there. And for everything that happened, he hoped he would go back and find the situation better, but it's worse.
All right, Sean Calebs, thank you.